China just made a move that could quietly break Iran's economy, and almost no one is talking about what it really means. For 2 decades, Beijing has been Iran's most important customer. Roughly 1.6 million barrels of Iranian oil flow to China every single day at prices well below the global market. That single trade line has kept Tehran's economy breathing under the heaviest sanctions in modern history. But over the past 48 hours, reporting out of Beijing suggests that pipeline of money is starting to bend in a direction Tehran did not see coming. And here's what makes this different from every other China-Iran story you've seen. This isn't about a speech. It isn't about a UN vote. It's about something far more powerful, Beijing quietly choosing where its oil money goes. Because in geopolitics, the country that controls the buyer always controls the seller. So let me show you exactly what's shifting, why it matters, and what happens next. The core shift is this. China appears to be diversifying its oil supply away from Iran and toward the United States, Saudi Arabia, and Brazil. If that trend holds over the next 6 to 12 months, Iran could lose its single largest customer. And with it, the financial engine that funds everything from domestic salaries to regional operations. That's the headline. Now let's unpack how we got here. The story starts with a simple problem. China imports about 11.6 million barrels of crude oil every day. It is the largest energy buyer on Earth. And for years, Beijing has run a clever balancing act, buying discounted Iranian oil while keeping a public distance from Tehran's politics. That balancing act is getting harder. Why? Because the global energy map is being redrawn. The United States is now one of the world's top oil producers. Saudi Arabia is hungry for long-term Asian buyers. Brazil's offshore output is climbing fast. And Russian crude, after Ukraine's sanctions, is competing aggressively for the same Chinese market. In short, China has options now. More options than at any point in the last 20 years. But here's the real issue. Options change behavior. When a buyer has options, the seller loses leverage. Iran has been selling oil to China at roughly $8 to $10 below the Brent benchmark. From Tehran's side, this looked like survival. From Beijing's side, it looked like a bargain. But discounts only work as long as you're the cheapest option. The moment another supplier offers similar terms, without the sanctions risk, without the shipping headaches, without the insurance premiums, the math flips. And that flip is exactly what we're starting to see. Now this changes everything. Because if China shifts even a third of its Iranian purchases to American or Saudi crude, Tehran loses hundreds of millions of dollars in monthly revenue. That's not a budget problem. That's a structural problem. To understand why this hits Iran so hard, you have to understand where the oil money actually goes. Iran's oil revenue doesn't just fund hospitals or schools. A large share flows into the country's security apparatus, most notably the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps, or IRGC. Analysts at the Atlantic Council and the International Crisis Group have long estimated that the IRGC controls a significant portion of Iran's economy, with figures often cited in the range of 20 to 40%, depending on the sector. The exact number is debated. The pattern is not. Oil money sustains the institutions that hold the system together. And that creates a question we'll come back to later. What happens inside Iran when that money starts to dry up? Hold on to that, because the answer is more important than the oil story itself. Let's talk about the Strait of Hormuz, because this is where the global stakes get real. Roughly 20% of the world's oil and a major share of liquefied natural gas pass through this narrow waterway every single day. It's only about 21 miles wide at its tightest point. A single disruption here, a tanker incident, an insurance scare, a navigation closure, can spike global energy prices within hours. So when tensions rise in the Gulf, 3 things happen almost immediately. 1. Shipping insurance premiums climb. 2. Tanker traffic reroutes or slows down. 3. Energy markets in Europe and Asia start pricing in risk. We've already seen versions of this in recent years. Qatar has paused LNG shipments through the region during past escalations. Shipping companies have rerouted vessels. And consumers from German households to Indian factories end up paying the bill. But here's what most analysts get wrong about Hormuz. The real battle isn't military. It's economic, and it's already underway. If China is genuinely shifting its posture, it now holds 3 powerful levers over the situation. Let me walk you through each one, because they explain almost everything that happens from here. Lever 1, the oil purchase lever. This is the most direct. Every barrel of Iranian crude that Beijing replaces with American, Saudi, or Brazilian supply is revenue Tehran cannot recover quickly. Iran's oil customer base is already narrowed due to sanctions. Losing the biggest one would be devastating. Lever 2, the diplomatic lever. For years, China has played a protective role for Iran at the United Nations Security Council, often working with Russia to soften resolutions. If Beijing's posture cools, that diplomatic shield weakens. New rounds of coordinated international pressure suddenly become possible. Lever 3, the maritime lever. This one is more speculative but worth watching. Reports in defense publications have noted growing Chinese naval activity in the Indian Ocean and Gulf region. If Beijing ever decides to escort its own tankers through the Strait of Hormuz independently, that would represent a major shift in regional power dynamics and reduce Iran's traditional leverage over shipping in the area. Now, this is where it gets interesting, because these three levers don't have to all be pulled. Just the possibility that they could be is already changing how markets, governments, and Tehran itself are behaving. Remember that open loop from earlier. What happens inside Iran when the money tightens? This is where the story gets less about oil and more about political survival. Iran is already navigating high inflation, a weakened currency, and ongoing public frustration. Major protests over the past several years, from economic grievances to social freedoms, have revealed real internal pressure on the system. When external revenue drops, that pressure intensifies. Historically, governments under economic stress have two options. They can reform, opening dialogue and reducing tensions. Or they can double down, projecting strength externally to distract from problems at home. Most analysts at think tanks like the Carnegie Endowment and Chatham House have noted that Iran has, in moments of acute pressure, tended toward the second pattern: heightened regional activity, military exercises, and stronger rhetoric. But here's the part most people miss. Projecting strength is expensive, and projecting strength while losing your biggest customer is a contradiction that cannot last forever. Let's zoom out, because this story doesn't end at Iran's borders. If China continues shifting its energy purchases, the ripple effects spread fast. For the United States, a new long-term Asian buyer for American crude would be a significant economic win. It strengthens the dollar's role in energy trade and supports the U.S. shale industry. For Saudi Arabia, deeper integration with the Chinese market reinforces the Gulf's pivot toward Asia, a trend that's been building since the early 2020s. For Europe, anything that stabilizes Hormuz traffic is good news. European energy security is still recovering from the post-Ukraine adjustment, and the continent cannot afford another supply shock. For India, which imports a huge share of its oil from the Gulf, calmer waters mean cheaper energy and lower inflation, a real domestic political benefit. And for Russia, this is more complicated. Moscow has positioned itself as a strategic partner to both Beijing and Tehran. If China leans westward on Iran, the Kremlin loses a piece of that triangle. So we're not looking at a single story. We're looking at a chain reaction that touches every major energy market on the planet. Now to the part everyone wants to know. What comes next? Let me lay out three realistic scenarios, ranked by what most analysts consider plausible. Scenario 1, gradual rebalancing. This is the base case. China slowly diversifies its oil sources, Iran loses revenue over months rather than weeks, and Tehran adapts by deepening ties with Russia and trying to find new buyers in Asia and Latin America. Tension rises but stays manageable. Markets stay nervous but functional. Scenario 2, Iranian escalation. If Tehran feels cornered, it may increase activity around Hormuz, not full conflict, but heightened harassment, drone incidents, or symbolic seizures of vessels. The goal would be to raise insurance costs and force the international community back to the negotiating table. This scenario hits global energy prices hard but stops short of war. Scenario 3, diplomatic reset. The least discussed but not impossible. Under sustained economic pressure, Iran could re-enter serious negotiations on its nuclear program in exchange for sanctions relief. We've seen versions of this before with the 2015 JCPOA. Whether it happens again depends heavily on who is at the table and how much leverage each side believes it holds. Whichever scenario plays out, the trigger is the same: the slow shift in where China sends its oil money. Here's what I want you to walk away with. The biggest geopolitical shifts rarely happen on battlefields. They happen in trade ledgers, shipping manifests, and oil contracts. The 2026 story isn't really about summits or speeches. It's about a quiet question being asked in Beijing right now. Can we afford to keep being Iran's biggest customer? If the answer trends toward no, then almost everything else, the diplomacy, the military posturing, the headlines, flows from that single decision. And the next 6 to 12 months will tell us which way it lands. If this analysis helped you see the bigger picture, hit the like button. It genuinely helps the channel grow. Subscribe for more grounded geopolitical breakdowns, no drama, no clickbait, just clear analysis. And drop a comment with which of the three scenarios you think is most likely. I read every single one.